General Harun Khan stepped down from the black sedan and paused for a moment at the edge of the cracked concrete sidewalk, adjusting the peaked cap that bore 4 gleaming stars. His polished shoes tapped softly against the pavement as he moved toward the modest entrance of Precinct 12. The morning sun angled through thin clouds, casting a gentle light that made his uniform look almost ceremonial, as if he were arriving for a grand parade rather than an ordinary meeting. He had come to speak with community leaders about a new Veterans Outreach program, one he had helped design to bring retired soldiers and local neighbors together in friendship and support. The station building loomed ahead, a low brick facade, with tall windows, each pane showing the gray-blue glow of computers inside. A worn sign above the door read Precinct 12, its letters slightly faded from years of sun and rain. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee, paper files, and the sharp temps of antiseptic spray used on the linoleum floors. General Khan had visited many military bases with far sterner atmospheres, but this was his first time inside a city police station. He drew a steady breath, squared his shoulders, and opened the door. 2 junior officers sat at a metal counter just beyond the entrance. Their badges shone under the bright fluorescent lights. They glanced up as Khan entered, lips curling into smirks. Almost at once, one of them leaned toward his partner and whispered something. Both snickered, and Khan heard fragments. "Pretty uniform show-off? 4 stars, huh?" He recognized them from the precinct roster. Their names were Lieutenant Davis and Lieutenant Herrera, young officers, mid-twenties. They had served just a few years and had already gained a reputation for loose talk and ribbing anyone in a suit. Khan approached the counter with calm confidence. His posture was straight, but his expression was neutral, neither angry nor amused. He cleared his throat softly. The 2 lieutenants straightened, though their eyes still glinted with disrespect. "Good morning, gentlemen," Khan said in a measured voice. "I'm here to meet with Ms. Parker and Mr. Singh regarding the Veterans Outreach. They should be in Conference Room B." Lieutenant Davis shot Khan a glance that mixed doubt and mockery. "Hey. Conference Room B?" he echoed as if ordering. "Room service in a hotel." Then he looked back to Herrera and mouthed, "Big shot." Herrera let out a low laugh, which turned into a sudden cough when he saw Khan still standing. Khan did not flinch. He moved his right hand to the small pile of papers under his arm, the agenda, program details, and community profiles. Them gently on the counter. The lieutenants glanced at the documents as if they might be secret codes. Herrera tapped one of the papers and scoffed. "That look like real work to you?" he asked Davis in an exaggerated whisper, loud enough for Khan to hear. Khan's lips pressed into a thin line, but his voice remained calm. "These are outlines for next week's meeting," he replied evenly. "The veterans and community members will share stories and resources. It will help build trust." Davis leaned back, propping one elbow on the counter. "Trust?" he asked, voice heavy with sarcasm. "You sure they'll want trust when they see the police and the army cozying up? Not everyone likes uniforms these days." A flicker of surprise crossed Herrera's face, as if he hadn't thought of that angle. But Davis went on, turning to Khan. "I got a feeling some of the folks around here might see you as just another suit. Why bother?" The insult hung in the air like smoke. Khan could feel the tension in the small station lobby, as though everyone present had suddenly quieted to listen. He took a step forward, careful not to invade anyone's space, but making sure his words carried weight. "I agree," he said softly. "Some people will see my uniform first, and only later learn that I'm here as a friend, not a stranger. But I believe that true service is about making connections where trust is missing. That's why I'm here today." For a moment, neither lieutenant spoke. Khan could see their expressions shift from mockery to a grudging curiosity. But then Herrera smirked again. He leaned in and said quietly, "You talk big, General. But do you know what it's like to walk these halls day in and day out, dealing with crime, accidents, angry people? You think words fix that?" Khan inhaled. A slow, full breath, letting the rhythm steady his heart. He listened to the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant murmur of telephones ringing in the offices beyond. Somewhere nearby, a woman's voice asked for backup. A radio crackled news of a suspected stolen car fleeing across town. Life at the precinct rolled on, unbothered by the arrival of a high-ranking officer. Or so it seemed, I understand, Khan said, keeping his tone steady. I have known moments of chaos. I have seen the cost of decisions made too quickly. In my time in the service, I have had to lead troops through dangerous situations, sometimes with lives hanging in the balance. I know that words alone do not solve every problem, but they can open doors that otherwise stay closed. Lieutenant Davis snorted. Open doors, he muttered. Like this one? He reached behind the counter and pressed a small button. The door to the hallway clicked open. Beyond, the corridor stretched with painted walls and bulletin boards plastered with missing persons posters, neighborhood watch flyers, and a framed Officer of the Month certificate. The overhead lights shone cold and bright, making the polished floor shine. Khan thanked him and stepped through, nodding in acknowledgement to a female sergeant walking briskly by. She glanced at him and offered a curt nod before moving on. She wore a look that mixed surprise and respect. She must have recognized him as the general. He thought he heard her whisper to a partner, "That's him." In the hallway, the station felt less like a public office and more like a crossroads of many paths. Doors to interrogation rooms, filing rooms, and the sergeant's office lined the walls. At the far end, a heavy door marked Conference Room B. Khan walked at a steady pace, pausing briefly to straighten his jacket and check his reflection. In a small window by an office door, he still appeared calm and focused. Just as he reached the conference room door, he heard footsteps behind him, rapid, uneven steps. He turned and saw Lieutenant Davis striding toward him, Herrera close behind. Davis stopped just before Khan, breathing a bit hard from the quick pace. Herrera stood a half step back, arms folded. "You think you can just come in here with your stars and act like you own the place?" Davis asked, voice low but firm. "This station has rules, and you—" He waved a hand at Khan's chest. "You think you're bigger than those rules?" Khan noticed the anger in Davis's eyes. He did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked down at the lieutenant's chest badge, then met his gaze again. He spoke softly but clearly. "Lieutenant Davis, I respect your service here. You and your colleagues work long hours under difficult conditions. All I ask is the same respect you would show any visitor." Herrera let out a short laugh, and Davis stepped back. "Respect?" he scoffed. "This is respect?" He gestured back, down the hallway. "You insulted us by showing up here unannounced." Khan's brow furrowed slightly. He spoke more firmly now. "If you found my arrival unexpected, I apologize for not notifying you sooner. I spoke with the station captain hours ago. Something must have gone wrong with the message." Herrera grunted, unconvinced. Davis folded his arms and nodded at Herrera. "Friendly as ever," he muttered. Then he said aloud to Khan, "Go on, get inside. But don't think this stops here." Khan pressed his lips together, then turned to open the conference room door. Inside, a long table waited. 2 chairs were already occupied by Ms. Parker, a local community organizer, and Mr. Singh, a retired teacher. They looked up as Khan entered, relieved smiles on their faces. The tension in the hallway faded slightly behind him. Once Khan took his seat, Ms. Parker leaned in and whispered, "Are those the lieutenants?" They seemed upset. Khan nodded. "They did not expect me, but I hope we can work through this." He cleared his throat and stood again. "Thank you both for waiting. Let's begin." Outside the door, Lieutenant Davis and Herrera exchanged a look. Davis shook his head, as if disappointed by Khan's control. Herrera tapped his partner on the shoulder. "Maybe he's not all talk," he said quietly. "Something about him. I don't know." Davis frowned but did not argue. Together, they walked back toward the counter in the lobby. As they passed other officers, a few stopped to ask quietly, "Is that General Khan? What happened out there?" The lieutenants shrugged and kept walking. By mid-afternoon, word had traveled through the precinct's grapevine. Officers in the break room whispered about the 4-star general who faced down the lieutenants. Dispatchers mentioned it between calls. Even the captain, returning from an off-site meeting, stopped at the counter to get a quick briefing. He frowned when he heard about the unsanctioned confrontation, then tapped his desk phone to call headquarters. Meanwhile, Khan spoke with community members in Conference Room B. He shared stories of camaraderie from his deployments. And the veterans around the table nodded as they recognized the same feelings. Neighbors spoke of their own struggles and hopes. Energy shifted from the earlier tension to something warmer, more hopeful. Khan's words built a bridge where doubt once stood. Back in the hallway, the first hints of a resolution hovered in the air. The city had reacted strongly to the disrespect shown to an honored general. Rafting AM. By late afternoon the next day, word of what happened at Precinct 12 had spread like a fresh wind through the city. At the station entrance, 2 news crews set up cameras and microphones. The officers inside worked under the watchful gaze of television lights and the constant click of still photographers. Reporters called in updates, narrating the story of how 2 young lieutenants had insulted a 4-star general. On the sidewalk, a small crowd formed, their faces lit by smartphone screens capturing every detail. Some held handmade signs. One read, "Respect our heroes." Another asked, "Who guards the guards?" An older man balanced himself on a cane and waited patiently, while a teenage boy perched on a low wall, curiosity shining in his eyes. Mothers used their phones to stream live video to friends and family. Conversations bubbled over in mixed tones, anger at the officers, pride in the general, and anxiety over what it all meant. Inside the station lobby, Captain Ruiz paced between desks. He was a man in his late 40s with streaks of gray in his hair, and he usually carried a calm presence. But now, his shoulders were tense, his brow furrowed. In his hands he held 2 complaint forms already filled out by community members and by General Khan's aide. One form was marked Lieutenant Herrera, the other Lieutenant Davis. Ruiz stared at the names as if trying to make sense. Of it all, his desk phone rang. He lifted the receiver. "Captain Ruiz," he said in a steady voice, though his heart raced. On the other end was the city's deputy mayor. She asked for a summary of the events and pressed him on what steps the department would take. She spoke of public outrage and the importance of maintaining trust. Ruiz promised an immediate review. He hung up and rubbed his temples. At a nearby desk, Sergeant Lin glanced up. She knew the captain had to make a choice: either handle the matter quietly within the station or escalate it through City Hall and risk a public showdown. Lin had heard the lieutenants joking about the general. She had overheard their words. She also knew they were good officers, in other ways reliable on patrol, quick to respond, calm in emergencies. She frowned as she looked at the complaint. "Forms. I think they need a formal hearing," Lin said softly. "We cannot ignore what they said. A general is not a judge, but he is a symbol of our nation's defense. Disrespect like that could tear at the community's faith in us." Ruiz nodded wearily. "I agree, but a hearing means going public," he said. "I worry about the fallout. We've been working hard to improve relations with our veterans. This could send us back to square one." Lin leaned forward. "Sometimes we need to face our mistakes to grow beyond them." Ruiz closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "You're right. We'll suspend both officers with pay while we investigate. No special treatment. We must show we take this seriously." Back in the lobby, the 2 lieutenants sat on metal chairs side by side, but separated by an empty seat. Both wore crisp uniforms, their badges catching the glare of overhead lights. Lieutenant Herrera stared at the tile floor, arms folded. "Lieutenant." Davis tapped his polished boot against the linoleum. Neither had expected an official complaint so quickly. A sergeant approached and handed them suspension notices. "You are relieved of duty pending investigation," he said, voice firm but polite. "Return your sidearms and keys at the desk." Herrera's jaw clenched. Davis swallowed hard. They both knew they were in deeper trouble than a simple reprimand. On the sidewalk outside, reporters took turns interviewing citizens. A middle-aged nurse, wearing scrubs and a surgical mask, spoke into a camera. "I have served in the military hospitals," she said, in a clear voice. "I know what discipline and honor mean. Officers should apologize. A young lawyer holding a briefcase shook his head. Law enforcement must respect our Army leaders. This behavior undermines unity. As the sun dipped lower, streetlights flickered on along the broad avenue. Chill breeze ruffled coats and scarves. Citizens still crowded the area, though some had left for evening routines. A few older veterans stood near a statue in front of City Hall, paying silent tribute with drill-precision salutes. Passers-by slowed to watch. The scene felt like a small festival, charged by respect and fury in equal measure. Inside Precinct 12's break room, officers gathered around a TV set. The local news anchor's voice recounted the day's events. The city's police department has suspended 2 officers after they were accused of insulting 4-star General Haroon Khan. An official investigation is now underway. Footage showed the lieutenants standing stiffly by their commander, looking uneasy under the glare of camera lights. The veterans' outreach materials were visible on a table behind them. Officer Martinez shook his head. I can't believe they did that, he said to a few colleagues. General Khan is a hero, so many of us went through training under him. Officer Chen nodded. This will hurt our reputation. People already talk about police brutality and corruption. Now this? Another officer, casual in uniform, leaned against the table. Look, I get it if they had a bad day, but their words were unprofessional. We're supposed to keep our city safe, not insult its protectors. By evening, the precinct captain held a meeting with senior staff. The conference room was full. Of chairs arranged in a semicircle, Ruiz stood at the front, papers in hand. Faces shone, calm presence now looked tense, as if waiting for orders. Thank you for coming at short notice, Ruiz began in a measured tone. I know you have questions about the suspensions. This matter has gained public attention, and rightly so. We will follow our policies. The 2 lieutenants will have a hearing next week. Until then, they remain suspended with pay. We will cooperate fully with City Hall and, if necessary, outside investigators. Murmurs of approval and concern rose from the room. Captain Ruiz held up a hand. I want to remind everyone that this incident does not define you or our entire force. Many officers display courage, kindness, and dedication every day. Our task now is to maintain our standards, support each other, and rebuild any trust that has been shaken. Sergeant Lin spoke next. I propose a department-wide brief on respectful conduct, chain of command, and community relations. We should also meet with Mr. Singh and Ms. Parker to reassure them of our commitment to veterans and civilians. Ruiz nodded. Good idea. Let's schedule that by tomorrow morning. He paused, looking at each person in the room. Remember, we serve? This city, people expect fairness. We must show it in how we treat our own and how we handle mistakes. Outside, the night settled over the city. Lights from high-rise buildings reflected in river waters. Precinct's front door closed softly behind the last officer leaving for the night. A lone patrol car idled in front, its engine humming. 2 uniformed officers sat inside, quietly reviewing reports of minor traffic incidents. Somewhere across town, General Khan reviewed notes for the Veterans Program. He had chosen to delay another engagement in light of the station incident. He believed this offered a chance for real dialogue between the Army and the police at the community level. In his study, cool lamps cast soft light over the pages. He paused, his pen hovering over a list of topics. Shared training, emergency response, mental health support. He underlined each item. In a small office on the 2nd floor of City Hall, Mr. Singh and Ms. Parker sat with the mayor's assistant. They discussed how to handle public meetings in the coming weeks. He knew the city's attention would be on veterans and civic pride. They planned a forum at the community center, inviting police officers, retired soldiers, and local families. Singh tapped his index finger on the table, considering the seating plan. Parker made notes on her tablet. Back at Precinct 12, Lara Nguyen, a community liaison officer, finished compiling contact lists for the forum. She printed flyers to post. In libraries, parks, and senior centers, she hoped the outreach would heal hurt feelings and build trust rather than deepen divisions. Later that night, in a quiet living room, Lieutenant Davis sat alone at the dining table. He held a cup of tea in his hands, staring at the steam rising. Memories of his career played in his mind. First day of training, mentors who showed him respect, chances he had to prove himself. Now he faced a formal hearing in public embarrassment. His mother had called earlier, worried. His father, also in law enforcement, had sent a supportive text but reminded him of the oath he took. Lieutenant Herrera lay on his couch, phone flashlight reading messages from friends. Some urged him to fight the charges. Others told him to own up and apologize. He felt trapped between loyalty to his partner Davis and the truth of what he said. As midnight approached, the city slowed. Street cleaners passed Precinct 12, clearing leaves and papers. The flashing blue lights of patrol cars were rare now. Silence returned to the wide avenue. Inside the station, Captain Ruiz reviewed the day's files one last time. He stacked the complaint forms, the suspension notices, the internal memo he would send to the whole force tomorrow. He looked at his reflection in the dark screen of his computer. He reminded himself that leadership meant tough choices and that respect deserved defense, whether for a 4-star general or for his own officers. He clicked save and stood. Tomorrow would bring investigations, interviews, and public statements. But tonight, he let himself believe that the city could heal from this, that the clash between the police and the army might become a lesson in unity. ChatGPT said, by the next morning, the city woke to a different kind of buzz. The usual sounds of traffic and street vendors had been joined by a constant chorus of smartphone cameras and social media alerts. Videos of the insult at Precinct 12 appeared on every platform. Clips showed Lieutenant Davis leaning against the counter, arms folded, as he sneered up at General Khan's stiff uniform and polished shoes. Herrera's laughter cut through the lobby just before Khan turned away with calm dignity. Within minutes of being posted, the first video had several thousand views. By breakfast time, it had turned into hundreds of thousands. Comments poured in. Some viewers cheered the general for keeping his cool, others condemned the lieutenants in harsh words. A few messages spoke of deeper mistrust between police and military. One user wrote, "If our protectors can't protect respect, what hope do the rest of us have?" Another asked, "Will the city's leaders act or stay silent?" In neighborhoods across town, the conversation jumped from Web 2 sidewalk. At a coffee stall near the university, students huddled over steaming cups, scrolling through their feeds. One spoke up, voice low but urgent. "Treated a hero like he was garbage," she said. "That's not right." Her friend nodded and posted a link to a petition demanding an apology. At a bus stop by the riverfront, 2 retired soldiers in uniform shirts checked the videos on a tablet. Their hands shook slightly as they replayed the moment when Herrera's laugh rang out. "I served under General Khan in the north," one said quietly. "He led us through mud and snow. To see him mocked, it hurts." His companion tapped the screen and added a voice note. "We need to stand with him." Meanwhile, on the city's official Twitter account, the mayor's office faced a flood of direct messages. Citizens tagged at Mayor Rahim, demanding a statement. The mayor's team gathered in a glass-walled conference room downtown. Staffers read aloud headlines from news sites. "City police insult top general, public outcry grows who guards." The guards. City leaders under pressure. Defense Secretary to visit a will she address insult. Council member Aisha Iqbal leaned forward and tapped her pen on the park green table. "We need to show we care," she said. "If we stay silent, people will assume we side with the lieutenants. That cannot happen." The mayor sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled. He looked tired, but determined. "Draft a statement," he said. "Acknowledge the hurt. Promise an inquiry. And reassure everyone that respect for the uniform matters here." Back at Precinct 12, Captain Ruiz already had notes for his own statement. He practiced in front of the mirror beside his desk, voice low and firm. "We deeply regret the words spoken by 2 officers toward General Khan. An investigation is underway." He paused, trying to find the right tone between apology and authority. He would deliver the message at noon, after coordinating with City Hall. While all this unfolded, the Defense Secretary, Amara Siddiq, was on the road. She had flown in early that morning for a scheduled visit to the city's Defense Research Institute. Her convoy of black vehicles navigated the highway past factories and highways. In the back seat of her lead car, Siddiq reviewed briefing papers on new technology projects. She had been looking forward to meeting engineers and students. Her assistant whispered into her earpiece, "Ma'am, have you seen the videos circulating online? There is a situation at Precinct 12 involving General Khan." Siddiq looked up. From her notes, her expression shifting from concentration to concern. She asked quietly, "What exactly happened?" The assistant outlined the insult and the growing public reaction. Siddiq sat back, fingers tapping the leather armrest. She had great respect for General Khan's reputation for calm. Leadership and deep care for his troops was known in her office. She glanced out at the passing cityscape, eyes narrowing with resolve. "Reroute us to Precinct 12, she said. "I will address this directly before continuing." The convoy changed course, weaving through city streets lined with tall buildings and busy shops. In the second vehicle, staffers alerted local security and news outlets. Word spread that the defense secretary herself would appear at the station. A wave of anticipation rose online as people wondered how she would respond. Some speculated she would issue a private reprimand. Others hoped she would make a public example. At the station entrance, the media presence thickened. Porters reset cameras and adjusted microphones. The crowd on the sidewalk grew larger, now joined by veterans in uniform and casual dress. A group of elderly men leaned on canes, some saluting as each convoy car passed. Younger onlookers cheered softly, holding signs that read, "Support our generals and respect above all." Inside the lobby, Captain Ruiz opened the conference room door and spoke into his radio. "All units, stand by for high-level arrival. Secure public access routes." Officers moved quickly but quietly, clearing the lobby and directing the media to set up behind barricades. The two suspended officers watched from a secure office, their faces a mixture of shame and fear. Neither spoke. In the main hall, General Khan stood near the window, arms crossed behind his back. He watched the preparations with quiet patience. His uniform remained immaculate, his cap under his arm. It did not show anger or excitement, only a steady calm like falling water that neither rushes nor drips. Aides passed him, water and notes. He read each note slowly, nodding. A distant siren cut through the air. It came closer, then split into two high-pitched wails as police motorcycles led the motorcade. Engines hummed. Tires rolled over the pavement. The crowd leaned forward. A hush fell over the lobby as the doors swung open. Defense Secretary Siddiq stepped in, tall and composed in a tailored gray suit. She walked with General Khan to her side, at a respectful 2-pace distance. Aides and security flanked them. Cameras flashed. Porters shouted questions, but she raised a hand and spoke first. "Good morning," Siddiq began, voice clear and firm. "Today, I stand here not just as your defense secretary, but as a citizen who values respect and unity." She paused, letting her words settle. "What occurred here yesterday was unacceptable. General Khan has served our country with honor. Our military and our police are both fundamental pillars of our nation's security." She turned to face Lieutenant Davis and Herrera, who had been escorted from their holding office into the lobby. Their shoulders hunched as they met her steady gaze. Siddiq's eyes met theirs. She spoke each word with calm authority. "Lieutenant Davis, Lieutenant Herrera, you are suspended pending a full inquiry. You will have your day in that inquiry. But for now, you must step back from duty. Respect is not optional. It is earned and maintained by every person in uniform." The lieutenants bowed their heads. Lieutenant Herrera's jaw tightened as he stared at the floor. Davis swallowed hard but did not speak. Behind them, officers in the lobby watched silently. Some faces showed relief, others, curiosity. Siddiq turned back to the assembled media and public. "I trust that this department and this city will show that we can correct our mistakes. We will work together, military and police, veterans and citizens, to rebuild trust." She nodded to General Khan. He stepped forward and offered his own brief words. "Thank you, Secretary. Today we take the first step toward understanding one another. I believe in our shared mission." The crowd softened. Cameras captured the moment as Siddiq and Khan moved toward the exit. Outside, the sun peeked through clouds, casting warm light across the sidewalk. The crowd broke into polite applause. A few veterans raised salutes. Reporters jotted notes and prepared to broadcast statements. As the motorcade resumed its route, the city seemed to breathe out. Social media feeds filled with supportive messages for the Secretary's swift action, and hope that this crisis would become a lesson in unity. Online polls showed a majority backing the inquiry and praising the leadership. In the following hours, the mayor's office released its prepared statement. The police department announced the formation of a special committee to review, respect, and conduct. Community leaders began planning forums. The air of tension slowly shifted to one of cautious optimism. By midday, the city had moved into a new chapter. 4-star general, 2 lieutenants, and a determined defense secretary had collided in conflict and emerged with a promise: respect for institutions, accountability for mistakes, and a shared path toward stronger trust. And so the city watched, listened, and hoped that out of this moment of shock, something better would grow. The day had been gray and cool when the motorcade turned off the main road and rolled toward Precinct 12. Black SUVs moved in perfect formation behind 2 police motorcycles, their sirens off but their blue lights flashing in quiet warning. Onlookers paused in the street. Some shook their heads in curiosity, others lifted phones overhead to record what they thought might be a routine visit. They did not yet know it would become anything but routine. Inside her lead vehicle, Defense Secretary Amara Siddiq sat upright in the back seat. Her tailored suit was charcoal gray, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had reviewed her schedule for the day: meetings about equipment upgrades, conversations with research teams, a luncheon with civic leaders, yet none of those engagements. It mattered when she learned about the insult. As the car's engine hummed, Siddiq reread the briefing note sent by her aide. 2 officers had mocked a 4-star general inside this police station. In her voice, at her level, respect was not a simple courtesy. It was the backbone of service. A soft knock on the partition glass caught her attention. Her security officer slid open a small panel. "Ma'am, we're approaching the station. All units are on alert for your arrival," Siddiq nodded. She pressed her fingertips together and closed her eyes for a moment. She could already imagine the tension inside the lobby, the mixed reactions of officers on duty, the whispers of reporters vying for sound bites. The next few minutes would matter more than many days in her office. Outside, the sky brightened as the cars pulled up to the station's front doors. Uniformed officers lined each side of the entrance, standing straight with their hands folded. Behind their backs, some wore dark blue jackets against the morning chill, others held clipboards or radios. Media crews had erected cameras behind makeshift barricades, their microphones pointing toward the door. Beyond them, a crowd of civilians, veterans, and fatigues. Families with children on shoulders, curious passers, bewaited in small clusters. The SUVs stopped. A hinged step folded out from the side of the lead vehicle. Secretary Siddiq paused, smoothing her skirt, and rose carefully. General Haroon Khan, already inside his own car, stepped out simultaneously, his 4-star cap in hand. He met her at the bottom of the step, and they shared a brief nod before walking toward the station together. As they approached, cameras began flashing like daylight through trees. Reporters shouted questions. "Secretary Siddiq, will you comment on the officer's behavior? Do you think the police should apologize? What message does this send to veterans everywhere?" Siddiq held up a gloved hand and spoke with firm calm. "Thank you all for being here. I will speak inside once we have settled." Her voice carried over the crowd, clear and measured. General Khan, silent beside her, offered a small, respectful smile before stepping through the doors. In the lobby, officers on duty snapped to attention. Some straightened their ties, others tucked loose papers away. The station's usual smells, coffee, paper, antiseptic, seemed heavier now, as if everyone held their breath. Captain Ruiz, alerted moments before, stood near the reception desk. He bowed his head slightly in greeting as the secretary and general entered. Siddiq paused under the bright ceiling lights. She looked around at the rows of desks, the glass panel windows leading into offices, the familiar beige walls lined with bulletin boards. But her eyes were fixed on the lieutenants, Davis and Herrera, who had been brought forward from their holding office. They stood side by side, stiff and silent, their badges gleaming under the lights. Both wore pale expressions. Davis's jaw was tight, Herrera's lips pressed together in regret or fear. Siddiq took a deep breath and walked to the center of the lobby. A hush fell over the assembled officers and visitors. The click of cameras slowed to a near stop. Even the hum of computer screens seemed to fade. "Good morning," she began, her voice rich but soft. "Yesterday, 2 officers in this very building chose to mock a decorated general who came here in service to our community." She paused, meeting the eyes of each person before her. "I respect the difficult work. You all do. I have seen police officers stand between danger and our citizens. I have heard stories of sacrifice, bravery, and late nights spent protecting neighborhoods." She turned slightly toward General Khan. He stood a few feet away, watching her. "With steady calm," Siddiq continued, "but respect is not earned by title alone. It is maintained through everyday actions and words. When someone in uniform is insulted by those who wear another uniform, that disrespect echoes far beyond these walls. It shakes trust between city and military, between neighbor and protector." Tears flickered at the corners of some officers' eyes. A young sergeant swallowed, and an older detective clasped his hands behind his back. The crowd outside pressed against the glass doors, straining to hear. Secretary Siddiq drew a small folder from her bag. She flipped it open and removed 2 documents. "Lieutenant Davis, Lieutenant Herrera," she said, her tone firm. "I place before you formal orders of suspension pending a full and fair investigation. You will have the chance to explain yourselves, to share what led to your actions, and to demonstrate the respect this badge and your oath require." She stepped forward and handed the orders to each lieutenant. Both read them quickly, then looked up at her. Herrera's hand trembled slightly as he accepted the paper. Davis's eyes met hers, and he let out a slow breath. Siddiq nodded. "These orders take effect immediately. Till the inquiry is complete, you will step aside from duty. Trust that you will cooperate fully." She folded her arms gently, then addressed the wider group. "To the rest of you, including the civilians present, know that this department, this city, and this nation value accountability. We will not tolerate disrespect for those who serve." She turned to Captain Ruiz. "Captain, I expect you to oversee the investigation yourself, or appoint a senior officer who has no conflict of interest. I want regular updates on progress and findings." Ruiz swallowed and nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Inquiry team will begin today." Siddiq glanced back at General Khan. He offered a small salute, and she saluted in return. Then she lifted her hand to gesture at the lobby. "This moment is not just about discipline. It is about reaffirming our shared mission, to protect, to serve, and to respect one another. Let us move forward together, in unity, guided by the highest standards of honor." With that, she turned toward the exit. Journalists raced to capture her final words, and officers straightened jackets and uniform hats. The crowd behind the glass doors erupted into polite applauses, clapped in slow rhythm. Others raised fists softly in support. Outside, as she stepped into the sunlight, supporters and onlookers gathered closer. Veterans straightened in attention. Families lifted children higher to get a better view. Secretary Siddiq paused on the steps and addressed them briefly. "Thank you for your faith," she said. "This city will learn from this episode. It will remind us all that respect is not given by rank, but shown by action. Let us continue to work side by side for a safer, stronger community." She then got into her vehicle, the door closing behind her. The convoy rolled forward, leaving behind a station where the air felt fresher, as though cleaned by her words. Inside Precinct 12, officers filed back to their desks, still murmuring but with purpose. The 2 lieutenants carried their orders to the suspension office, accepting the weight of their actions. Captain Ruiz paused by the desk of Sergeant Lin, who offered him a reassuring nod. Together, they watched the motorcade disappear down the street. The calm smile on Ruiz's face showed relief. A crisis had been met with clarity and leadership. Change would follow the investigation, the forums, the training sessions, but the path had begun here, with respect firmly restored. In homes, In cafes across the city, phones buzzed with notifications. Online feeds showed the secretary's speech and the lieutenant's suspension orders. Comment threads filled with praise for the defense. Secretary's swift justice, in hopes that the city would build new bridges between police and military. And for many, the scene at Precinct 12 became a story not of conflict, but of accountability, unity, and the power of respectful action. The days after the defense secretary's visit to Precinct 12 felt different. The air in the city had changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but people walked a little slower, listened a little more carefully, and paid closer attention to uniforms, whether worn by police officers or military veterans. Something about that moment in the station lobby, when Secretary Siddiq calmly handed the suspension letters to the lieutenants, had settled into the hearts of people. In the station itself, officers returned to their daily routines, but now there was more quiet than usual. Conversations were softer. Even the clatter of computer keys seemed slower. Captain Ruiz held a staff meeting on Monday morning. Everyone gathered in the same conference room where, just a few days earlier, tension had filled the air. This time the tone was calm but serious. He stood at the front of the room with his hands behind his back. "I want to thank all of you for your professionalism during last week's events," he began. The situation was difficult, but what matters now is how we move forward. We're not here to blame. We're here to grow. Beside him, Sergeant Lin handed out new training schedules. All officers, new and old, would now attend workshops focused on respectful communication, leadership values, and public trust. These weren't ordinary classes with long lectures. It would include veterans, community leaders, and even students. The goal was to create conversation, not just instruction. Officer Martinez raised his hand. "Will General Khan be involved in the training?" he asked. Captain Ruiz smiled slightly. "He already agreed to speak during one of the opening sessions," he said. "Not as a general, not as a victim, but as someone who believes in bridges, not walls." Later that week, the community center hosted its largest event in years. Chairs were placed in neat rows in the basketball court. Long tables stretched. Across the front, covered in a simple white cloth, with nameplates for every speaker. Honors on the walls read, "Honor in service, unity in action." Veterans in camouflage jackets sat beside teenagers in school uniforms. Police officers in clean dress blues shook hands with civilians. General Harun Khan arrived quietly through the side entrance, holding a folder of notes. He didn't need to bring them, really. His message was already written in his heart. Still, the paper reminded him of the purpose. When his turn came to speak, he didn't go to the stage immediately. Instead, he walked to the center of the floor. He looked around the room at faces young and old, doubtful and hopeful, and then began. "My name is Harun Khan," he said. "I have worn this uniform for many years. I've led young men through battlefields and natural disasters. I've also stood in silence beside the grieving. I've shared meals with strangers in villages far from this city." He paused. Everyone listened. Even the kids who had been fidgeting sat up straight. "But one of the hardest moments in my service," he continued, "was not in war or disaster. It was standing in a city police station, not as a general, but as a man being looked down upon, not for anything I did, but for simply showing up." A soft murmur spread across the audience. General Khan raised a hand gently. "I do not bring this up to shame anyone," he said. "I bring it up to show how easy it is to lose sight of respect, how quickly we judge others without knowing their hearts." He told them about how, during his service, soldiers came from all backgrounds. Some were rich, some poor, some were loud, others quiet. But when they wore the same uniform, they stood for each other. They had one mission to serve. And that mission, he added, does not end when the uniform is taken off. It continues through our words, our actions, and how we treat the people we meet, whether in a market, a school, or a police station. When he finished, the applause was not thunderous, but it was deep, honest, and full of feeling. People stood, not just out of respect for his rank, but for the way he had turned pain into purpose. Later, the mayor stepped up to the podium. He cleared his throat and held up a new city document. "Today," he said, "we are launching the Respect and Honor Initiative, a partnership between the police department, the military, and the citizens. This program will make sure that what happened to General Khan never happens again. We are also creating a Veteran Civil Services Council that will meet monthly to share ideas and solve problems together." The crowd nodded in agreement. Even some of the quietest officers found themselves clapping. Meanwhile, across town, the two suspended lieutenants, Davis and Herrera, waited for their formal hearings. They were no longer on duty, but had been asked to attend a reflection session at the police academy. There, in a quiet classroom, they listened to speakers talk about dignity, service, and the weight of every word spoken in uniform. Lieutenant Herrera sat still, eyes lowered, as a former soldier described how one word of kindness at a checkpoint had changed his life. Lieutenant Davis leaned forward slightly as a young student shared how she feared the police until one officer knelt down to tie her brother's shoe after a parade. At the end of the day, both lieutenants stayed behind. They asked if they could write apology letters, not because anyone had forced them, but because they had begun to feel the weight of what they had said. Davis's handwriting was slow but steady. He addressed his note directly to General Khan. "I judged you without knowing your story," he wrote. "You showed strength not by raising your voice, but by keeping it calm. I will try to do the same in the future." Herrera's note was shorter, but heartfelt. "I laughed when I should have listened. I'm sorry. You deserved better. This has changed the way I see my badge." Both letters were hand-delivered to General Khan's office. He read them that evening, his face quiet and thoughtful. He did not show anger. Instead, he picked up a pen and wrote back to each man. To Davis, he wrote, "Growth begins with reflection. May your future in service be filled with wisdom." To Herrera, he wrote, "Understanding comes when we choose to learn, not defend. Keep choosing to learn." These small exchanges didn't make headlines, but they meant something. They became part of a deeper shift happening in the city. News stations, once focused on the insult and the outrage, now reported on community rebuilding, shared service programs, and dialogues between civilians and officers. Children at schools created posters showing police and military shaking hands. One poster, drawn by a 10-year-old, said "Strong Together." At Precinct 12, Captain Ruiz added a new photo to the wall, showed General Khan, Secretary Siddiq, and 3 young veterans standing in front of the stations, smiling. The frame was placed beside the precinct's mission statement, to serve with honor and build trust daily. And every morning, as officers walked past that wall to begin their shifts, they saw the photo. Some paused, some nodded. Some said nothing, but all of them remembered. This was no longer just a story about a mistake or a moment of disrespect. It had become something greater, a reminder that even small words carry weight, that even large uniforms don't guarantee respect, and that healing begins when people are brave enough to admit we can do better. And the city, once shaken by a moment of division, now stood taller. Not because the problem had been erased, but because the people chose to face it, learn from it, and walk forward, Tog.